everyone. The title of my presentation is the title of my presentation is Making Docile Female Bodies, Biopower and Virginity Examinations in Turkey. The reason I chose this subject is that these virginity examinations took place in 1990s in Turkey, and I was only like 7-10 years old, and they really disturbed me even though I was very small. But these happen in Turkey all the time, so. So Fatima Mernissi, a leading feminist in Morocco, explains the desire for virginity in men as the key to the affirmation of their honor and masculinity by arguing that it locates the prestige of a man between the legs of a woman. She goes on to say that it is not by subjugating nature or by conquering mountains and rivers that a man secures his status, but by controlling the movements of women related to him by blood or by marriage, and by forbidding them with any contact with male strangers. So the concept of virginity is a curious one, drawing attention in both modern and conservative societies due to the fact that it has been laden with intricate meanings, relations, codes, and tradition by the society. In Turkey, it's not uncommon to measure a man's honor by the purity of the woman he gets married to. First and foremost, on the smallest scale, the concept of virginity concerns a man who defines his masculinity and honor in and through the body of the other. On a larger context, this multi-layered meaning placed on the hymen, ultimately virginity, works not only on a personal level, but also on a social level. What it ultimately serves for, however, is the repression of the female sexuality, discipline of the female body, and regulation of reproductivity. Mernissi summarizes the purpose of the institution of virginity as to prevent women from producing children according to the rhythms of biology, the rhythms of pleasure, the rhythms of desire. So in other words, it aims at alienating a woman from her body, preventing her from being in touch with her sensual pleasures, desires, and sexuality. Virginity examinations are one of many ways that control and regulate female sexuality. The fact that virginity tests in 1990s in Turkey have been sponsored by the state suggests that the state has been involved in controlling the female body and regulating female sexuality. In fact, Turkish women's sexuality has been both repressed and shaped by various discourses and practices promoted by the state since the foundation of the new modern republic in 1923. Virginity ideals have been constructed by the modern nation state, which conferred the virtues such as chastity and modesty on women. Through various discourses and practices, female sexuality has been placed under paternal protection of the father, husband, and ultimately the state. The suppression of women's sexuality by the states has its roots in the Republic period, when the founding fathers created an image for women that is modern, revolutionary, but chaste, and almost asexual, if not for the emphasis on their maternal duties. The new Turkish Republic introduced a number of reforms such as co-education, political rights, equal rights in marriage and divorce for both men and women in public and private sphere. The new nation-state revolutionized the position of women, but the ideal image had to conform to the traditional role at the same time, which resulted in a paradoxical situation for women. Modern and westernized on the outside, chaste and virtuous inside. In her celebrated article, Honor of the State, Virginity Examinations of Turkey, Ayşe Parla argues, Atatürk and the founding fathers had to fashion a non-threatening public image for women, which they did by downplaying female sexuality to the point of invisibility. Therefore, even though the reforms of the Turkish Republic liberated women in public sphere to some extent, the female sexuality had to be effaced in order for women to continue to exist in public. Therefore, the gender norms for women were gradually shaped by the discursive strategies of the new nation-state. Modernization that came with the establishment of the new modern nation state did not diminish the importance given to the image of a woman who is virtuous and chaste, yet modernized at the same time. Virginity examinations that became more widespread in the early 1990s, not surprisingly, still retain the ideology of the modern Turkish nation state, in other words, liberal gender ideology, liberal yet virtuous. The examinations concentrated on two groups of women: schoolgirls, prostitutes, inmates of orphanages, and the second group, female members of PKK. It's the Workers' Party of Kurdistan, on the other hand. After the implementation of the tests, there were a number of girls who committed suicide either before the examination for fear of their family's reaction and after the examinations due to the trauma it made upon their psychology. With the increase in suicide rates, people were starting to voice their concerns and protests against the examinations. On the other hand, the minister responsible for women's affairs, as you can see in the picture, Docile Saygın, defended the examinations as proper and effective means of ensuring good upbringing in girls. She deemed the number of suicide cases insignificant. 3 girls, 5 girls, it doesn't matter if teaching tarbiyeh and sustaining the value judgments of the society were at stake. As a result of several protests of feminists and human rights activists, an amendment in 1997 was proposed in the parliament which granted the right to refuse, but with the consequence that refusal would effectively designate the person in question not a virgin. Therefore, while the proposed amendment granted the right to reject to undergo the examination, it automatically labeled those who refused as unchaste, sinful, and unethical. Eventually, in 1990, after several protestations and campaigns, the state passed an amendment which rendered taking the consent of women mandatory before performing a virginity exam. State-run virginity examinations, which maintained their controversial status for a while, were implemented not only to guard cultural values and to ensure the perpetuation of tradition in Turkey. From a theoretical perspective, they were clear manifestations of the state intervention into women's bodies, which can ultimately be interpreted as biopolitics in French philosopher and political theorist Michel Foucault's terms. More specifically, the examinations are a very clear representation of the Foucaultian concept of biopower and the two poles it centers upon. In the history of sexuality, Michel Foucault explains at length how sovereign power over the individuals changed from take life and let live to make live or let die. In other words, whereas the sovereign exercises power as a right to kill in classical times, starting from the 19th century, the power has transformed into a positive influence on life that endeavors to administer, optimize, and multiply it, subjecting it to precise controls and comprehensive regulations. Therefore, the new kind of power regulates and controls social and individual life by interfering into private lives of individuals. The power over life has developed on two axes, according to Foucault. One of them is centered on the body as a machine, which is disciplined, regulated, monitored to render more effective. The other concentrated on man as species, which is serving as the basis of biological processes like birth and mortality, longevity, life expectancy, and health. This power aims to subdue bodies and control populations, marks the beginning of what Foucault calls biopower. So my thesis is that the power in Turkey focuses on women's bodies, therefore lives, on two axes. One is centered on the female body as a machine, which is to be disciplined and regulated. The other focuses on the female body as species, whose reproductive qualities are regulated in order to control populations. In Foucault's words, a biopolitics of the population. So the first axis that concentrates on disciplining the female body with the aim of regulating female sexuality has been accomplished by the state through discursive and non-discursive practices in Foucaultian terms. So the discursive practices, which according to Foucault constitute fields of knowledge, can be interpreted in this specific case as various discourses of the state officials, ministers, and state doctors on virginity examinations, and premarital sex. The speeches of the minister in charge of women's affairs, you saw that picture, Işılay Saygın, defending the practice of virginity tests are one example. Another example is the fact that Yıldırım Aktun'a, the Minister of Health at the time, who is a doctor himself, admitted to ordering regular monthly virginity tests for female patients and defended the practice, saying they were to protect women from sexual abuse of men, both patients and staff. The fact that the tests were implemented by state doctors, which further strengthened the hands of the state in the matter, adds another dimension to the issue of the practice of the examinations. According to a study conducted by Dilek Cindoğlu, which aims to bring a medical perspective into the institution of virginity, she says, none of the OBGYN specialists that she interviewed show hesitation in declaring that they would perform virginity tests upon request. The willingness of doctors conducting the exams and their perceptions about the examinations also constitute an important part of the discursive aspect, contributing to the regulation of female sexuality. On the other hand, non-discursive practices, which constitute systems of power, can be considered as the practices that set the conditions of possibility of a concept, in this case, virginity examinations themselves and virginity surgeries. Virginity tests are considered legal in Turkey, which also justifies the status of the physician. In Turkish civil law, when there is a legal dispute, such as the cases of attempted rape or absence of bleeding on the first intercourse, the Forensic Medicine Department of Ministry of Health takes up the issue and can pursue virginity tests to examine if the woman has just been deflowered or not. Therefore, the virginity of a woman has already been in immediate protection under the legal laws of the state. Virginity exams that are conducted under legal protection of the state not only legitimizes but also justifies the exams in the eyes of people, society, as well as medical personnel. Another implication of the power that is centered upon the female body to discipline and regulate female sexuality is that this power aims to create docile female bodies. Although Foucault does not differentiate between female or male body, it is true that female body is under more pressure of the disciplinary mechanism of the power, be it in terms of physical appearance, gestures, or an ethical disposition. Foucault explains how the bodies are turned to docile bodies as what was then being formed was a policy of coercions that act upon the body, a calculated manipulation of its elements, its gestures, its behavior. The human body was entering into a machinery of power that explores it, breaks it down, and rearranges it. Thus, discipline produces subjected and practiced bodies, docile bodies. State intervention into women's bodies in the form of virginity examinations also aim to produce docile female bodies whose gestures, behavior, and relations are strictly monitored and controlled by the biopower. Foucault enumerates the techniques and disciplinary institutions among institutions as the army, schools, hospitals, and prisons. One might argue that examinations administered in state hospitals are perfect examples for the cooperation between techniques and disciplinary institutions. Foucault also says an administrative and political space was articulated upon the therapeutic space. It tended to individualize bodies, diseases and symptoms, lives and deaths. Drawing from this quote, one might also argue that virginity examinations are manifestations of intertwined affiliations between politics and medicine, which ultimately serves to regulate female sexuality by monitoring and disciplining female bodies. So the second axis of life that the biopower focuses on is the body as species. This is another pole around which the power organizes. The power of life organizes itself in order to control populations through a series of biological processes. As a result, the body is again subjected to an entire series of interventions and regulatory controls. So virginity exams are a direct result of the state's policy of intervention into the bodies of individuals, in this case women, with a specific purpose to control populations. With the end of the state implicated in the surveillance of virginity, the dimension has been taken onto a different platform, which involves a plan on a national level to control the population. So with their representatives such as state doctors, school managers, and the police, the disciplinary institutions are at work to discipline the female body in order to regulate not only the female sexuality, but also reproductivity, in this case, of virginity examinations. So to conclude, virginity tests in Turkey succeed in engaging and manipulating the female body on two levels, both of which serve biopolitical ends of the modern nation state in the name of perpetuating traditions and raising a virtuous youth. Though being strongly associated with religion, traditions, and cultural codes, the concept of virginity underlies a much more complex set of relations, mechanisms, and systems of power. So on the one hand, the examinations aim to discipline the female body with controls and monitorings. They serve to, on the other hand, they serve to the state policies of controlling the population by limiting reproductive qualities of women. As a result, state-run virginity exams in Turkey end up making docile female bodies whose gestures and behaviors are limited, sexuality repressed, and in conformity with the expectations of the power. And thank you so much.